I've seen a lot of dishonest political ads. That's just part of the game. I mean, there's been dishonest political ads as long as there have been political ads. But the ones that really grind my gears are the ones about public safety and telling lies about public safety. This is one such ad. Let's talk about it in our segment. Unbelievable. Dun, 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 dun. All right, you might think it's an off year, and so maybe you're not as in tune with elections that are happening. Shame on you. It's never an off year in politics. And there's actually, in the state of Washington, a lot of special elections being held because, you know, the puzzle pieces down in the state legislature were all moved around. There was a state senator elected to Congress. There were, unfortunately, a couple deaths among state legislators this year. And so, you know, there were some vacancies filled, and that means they have to actually run for those seats. So there's some really important races happening. There'll be an August primary and then the election in November. So the August primary is just a couple weeks away. So we're going to start talking about some of these really important races. Now, one of them is in the 33rd legislative district. So this includes SeaTac, Normandy Park, Des Moines, parts of Kent, Burien, and Renton. So the seat there is right now held by Edwin Oross, who's a Democrat. Edwin Oross was appointed to fill a vacancy. So he was appointed in 2024 by Democrats. He was their choice to fill a vacancy, but he has to now run to actually be elected to that seat. And who is challenging him? The current mayor of Burien, Kevin Schilling, also a Democrat, is challenging him. Now, I think there's a Republican in the race. I don't mean to be mean, but the Republican has no chance of winning in this district. So I'm sorry. Take that for what you want, but the Republican has no chance of winning. So it's going to be one of these two. It's either going to be Edwin Oross, who is the hand-picked Democrat who's picked to fill that seat, or Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling. Now, we've had Kevin Schilling on the show quite a bit. Kevin Schilling has been on the show because he has been speaking out aggressively about the state and King County's policies around homelessness. We'll get to more on that in a moment. But Kevin Schilling is absolutely a public safety Democrat. He's a very moderate Democrat, and he has been very outspoken against his own party about their lack of focus on public safety and about the policies they have pushed to make public safety worse. So he's like the epitome of a public safety candidate, which is odd because here is a flyer that Edwin Oross's campaign, an attack mailer, sent out. And if you saw this flyer, you would think that Kevin Schilling hates cops and he hates public safety. It says Kevin Schilling, the worst mayor in the state on police staffing. The Burien police expressed no confidence in Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling. Burien has the lowest number of officers per capita. So this is like a Kevin Schilling hates cops. Cops hate Kevin Schilling. He's horrible on public safety. And this flyer says, say yes to public safety, say no to Kevin Schilling. Holy smokes. That's about as bad as it gets. So I'm going to break down why this is true bullshit. But it shows this, and you guys know this by now because it's one of the chief things that I was angry about during the campaign of then gubernatorial candidate Bob Ferguson, now our governor, is after years and years of giving the middle finger to law enforcement, like literally trying police officers for murder who were acquitted by a jury of their peers, even in a very progressive city. The jury's like, they're not guilty. He turned around and ran a campaign saying he was like the public safety candidate, which was just crazy. But you can just say it. Yeah, and it's not true, but if voters believe it, then, you know, you can get away with it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of voters were fooled by Bob Ferguson saying he's the public safety candidate because he only made public safety worse and he's only 6 months on the job. So Edwin Oross probably saw that and thought, well, I can lie too. I can lie too and say that Kevin Schilling is bad for public safety and he hates cops. Who's going to say anything about it? We are. And now I'm going to make it my dying mission to make sure that you don't get to keep this seat you were appointed to simply because of this one mailer. So let's talk a little bit about the claims he makes about Kevin Schilling here, because it is true that Mayor Kevin Schilling got into a little bit of a dust-up disagreement with the Burien Police Department. That is totally true. But there, of course, are a lot of layers to that story. So it all centers around how bad the homeless crisis was getting in the city of Burien. And we played this video before. I mean, Tents on the sidewalks in the business district in Burien. It's a pretty small city, but it had become overrun with homeless people and drug abusers. And as a result, there was a lot of crime in this area. And as the mayor of the city, Kevin Schilling, is like, this is unacceptable. We can't have tents in the public park across from City Hall. We can't have tents on the sidewalks. And he took a very hard stance on it. And they passed an ordinance in the city of Burien that said you can't camp in public places. If we have shelter to offer, you can't camp in public places, and we're not going to allow it anymore. So what happened? Well, the Burien Police Department said we're not enforcing that. And you might think, well, why? Because who actually runs the Burien Police Department? It's a contract city. It's run by the King County Sheriff's Office. It's run by the King County Sheriff, who is what? A political appointee. At the time, a political appointee of an unhinged progressive politician named King County Executive Dow Constantine. And he made homelessness exponentially worse during his 16 years on the job. And he wanted there to be a hands-off approach to the homeless. He didn't want homeless camp sweeps. Can't have that. So Dow Constantine took his little puppet, the King County Sheriff, who controls the Burien Police Department, and they said, we're not enforcing the city of Burien's new rule to sweep homeless encampments. Not only are we not going to enforce it, we're going to sue Mayor Kevin Schilling and the city of Burien so we don't have to enforce it. Here was a clip we played at the time where Kevin Schilling was so mad about that, he goes on the news and calls out his own political party.
It's all motivated by politics.
Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling believes
I appreciate that question.
King County Executive Dow Constantine is behind today's announcement.
The chief says whatever Dow Constantine wants her to say. She's the appointed sheriff of the King County Executive.
This is 100% my decision. The executive gives me full authority for the operational considerations for the King County Sheriff's Office.
So he did get into a dust-up with the Burien Police Department. Who gets to choose the chief of the Burien Police Department? They're all controlled by the King County Sheriff, who is a political appointee of Democrats. So here you've got this Democrat, Mayor Kevin Schilling, who is going against his own party. Not so there's less public safety, so there's more public safety. Not so there's less policing, so there's more policing. And of course, he was right all along. There were stories that came out in the days after King County said, we're not enforcing this. This from Burien News. Since Dow halts Burien camping enforcement, second homeless death in 3 weeks. This is what Kevin Schilling was trying to avoid. People were dying in those homeless encampments in Burien. That was the reason they wanted to go in and sweep them. But King County and political appointees said, don't do that. And people kept dying. And ultimately, I would just note that the city of Burien prevailed in the lawsuits. So they kind of countersued. They sued the county for breach of interlocal agreement, their contract with the county for policing. And in all of this, who was right at the end of the day? Who did even these very progressive courts side with? They sided with the city of Burien and Mayor Kevin Schilling. That he had a right to go in and try to make his city more safe by sweeping these homeless encampments. So that's the guy that Edwin Oross, in his first campaign mailer, is painting as bad for public safety? Doesn't get more dishonest than that. Yes, it does. Just kidding. Because Edwin Oross himself is the antithesis of a public safety candidate. Why do you think Democrats hand-selected him to fill that vacancy? Because they knew that he was willing to vote with them every step of the way without questioning anything. And he did. In his first year in the legislature, just this past legislative session, just a couple of the public safety policies that he voted in favor of, House Bill 1125, remember, that was the judicial discretion to end prison sentences early. It would have allowed judges to let even murderers out of prison early. Edwin Oross voted for that. And now he has the audacity to say that his opponent isn't a public safety candidate. Edwin Oross also voted for House Bill 1178. This was the one that would have reduced sentences for gang members and reduced sentences for people who use guns to commit crimes. Edwin Oross voted for that out of the Public Safety Committee. Both of those things were on our list of the top 10 worst bills being considered in Olympia this past legislative session. And they were the two worst bills from a public safety perspective. Edwin Oross voted for both of them. And he has the audacity to send out a mailer saying his opponent, who has a strong track record on public safety, is the worst thing that could happen for public safety. I don't have to tell you how stupid the cops think that mailer was. There was a statement put out by the Law Enforcement Administrators of Washington taking Representative Edwin Oross to task for this sham of a mailer. They say Representative Oross's claim to be a champion for public safety or law enforcement officers is appalling. In addition to voting in favor of nearly every anti-public safety bill that passed the House Community Safety Committee, Representative Oross never once met with representatives of Washington's law enforcement leaders at any point during the 105-day legislative session, despite multiple requests to meet. They went on to say, it is telling that the first piece of legislation bearing his name was House Bill 1125, which sought to release convicted felons out of prison early. They went on to say there were no less than 6 different bills in the House during the 2025 legislative session that sought to provide more funding to Washington's law enforcement agencies. Representative Oross co-sponsored and championed the only one of the 6 that would allow $100 million to be spent without hiring a single new law enforcement officer. So Representative Oross, remember this is a big promise of Bob Ferguson's. Oh, I'm going to dedicate $100 million to hiring more cops. What happened? Well, he claimed to dedicate $100 million to hiring more cops, but actually when you read the fine print, it's contingent on cities increasing taxes, and then they can really use that money to do whatever they want as long as they deem it public safety, emergency management. They could hire more counselors. Not a dollar of it actually has to be spent on hiring more law enforcement officers, and that is the version that Representative Edwin Oross championed and had his name on. The worst of all the versions available. The version that does the least for public safety. And now he's out painting Kevin Schilling as the anti-public safety candidate. The guy's a liar, and he has no shame. The Law Enforcement Administrators of Washington concluded their statement by saying, Representative Oross's campaign mailer is more of the same voter gaslighting that makes public safety so elusive in the legislature. The Law Enforcement Administrators of Washington already supported Kevin Schilling for state representative. Having seen Representative Oross's campaign tactics, we support Kevin even more. Law enforcement leaders support Kevin Schilling because Kevin supports public safety. And I would just say, from my perspective, and again, I think we have, I would say, mostly independents and Republicans who watch this show. If you live in the 33rd legislative district, there is a big difference between these two Democrats. Night and day. And it's not just on the public safety front. Edwin Oross was given this seat by Democrats. And in return, he voted with them on every single major issue. Rent control, he voted in favor of it. Pay for striking union workers, he voted in favor of it. Gutting the parental Bill of Rights, he voted in favor of it. He is a far left Democrat who will never go against his own party. Now, Kevin Schilling is a Democrat. I disagree with Kevin Schilling on some things. I am sure that if he wins this race and he goes to Olympia, there will be votes he takes that I do not agree with. But I know that he is a much better option. If you are a sane human being, he is a much better option than the alternative. So while I'm not going to get too involved in politics like I did in 2024, I will make a recommendation in this race that you vote for Kevin Schilling for State House in the 33rd Legislative District. Even though there'll be a Republican on the ballot, what you don't want to do is to do what you want to do, first of all. Do what you want to do. But whatever Democrat makes it through the primary is obviously the person who's going to win. So if you vote for a Republican and send Edwin Oross through, Edwin Oross, who voted for all those crazy public safety policies, all the far left socialist policies, will get to keep his job. So your vote as a Republican, as an independent, absolutely matters in the August primary. And more than any of that, I don't like a liar. And I don't like somebody who lies to voters over an issue like public safety, which is truly life or death.